The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian for Breaking Down Security this week. Part 2 of our discussion with Amélie and Adam Baldwin, Amélie Koran and Adam Baldwin, Web Jedi and Adam_Baldwin on Twitter, is continuing. So this week is our discussion, the add-on discussion about open source sustainability. We talked about in this section of the audio, what happens if a developer has an application like Log4j or, at one time, Apache or Nginx or whatever, were, very small, little independent software, applications that people used instead of IIS back in the day. So Apache got big, Nginx got big. They had to create an organization around them because of their popularity. Log4j currently has support from, I believe, the Apache Foundation, but there are a ton of organizations and there are a ton of applications instead of organizations for somewhat popular applications. And so what we talked about in this section of the audio for this week was to ask the question, what happens when an app gets too popular? What mechanisms should be employed by the developers? Should it be better communication? Should there be an overarching organization that comes in and says, tries to help out? We talked about NPM, with, keeping track of developers and apps that get popular. One thing that happened after we recorded this was in response to the Log4j issue. There was a conference being held at the White House in Washington, D.C. about open source, topics like this. And a lot of the big groups and companies were included, like Google, who, they talked about how they were giving money to, organizations to help out with this stuff. Not sure if Google donating a bunch of money was going to actually help, fix the Log4j issue, but we have big organizations throwing money at somebody, which I think we talked between last week's and this week's episode that throwing money at a problem is good, but does it actually really solve the problem? So we talk about governance. We talk about maybe outreach from larger organizations about, hey, you're popular. Maybe you should give us, here's a way that you can help monetize these things. I also understand that there are certain patronage type bid what you want to fix this issue kind of items. So there's a lot of nuance here, but I hope what you get from the second part of this discussion is that it is a very thorny problem. There is a lot of people out there wanting code to be free and remain free. And we actually go into a little bit more. I'm recording this after we recorded our next episode. So we had April Wright and Alyssa Miller on. And so we actually spent a little bit of time on the next episode with them, because it's a different point of view, talking about the open source issues. And we talk a little bit more about the White House open source conference and open source sustainability and supply chain issues. So I'm going to stop talking and let y'all continue listening to the podcast. If you have any questions, please reach out on Twitter. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I think kind of what you mentioned there too is kind of where, I was talking about, prior open source projects where they kind of centrally managed their CVS repositories and that went through that process. The advent of things like GitHub, where it's, or even SourceForge at the time, where you're committing code and the public can choose to either use what is provided by a developer or fork it or integrate it into a larger project. Right. Now there's always this demand for absolute transparency in, GitLab and GitHub and all their brethren, so that, people kind of demand the ability to kind of like, well, essentially adult language here, fuck you, I'm gonna do it my way. And as much as Adam said, like, kind of abandoning it because of resources, burnout, and so forth, which is something that doesn't necessarily get talked about on that aspect of it. There's a point where, like, I'm not getting responses from those developers. I need this functionality. I need this capability. There's a hole that's been existing, or vulnerability that's been existing in this code base for a while, and I'm not getting that level of responsibility. So I'm going to take it upon myself to then create this package. And then all those people, as we were talking about, those consumers now need to decide, as like, well, are we going to hold off and put faith in that this original developer is going to kind of keep maintaining it? And how are they going to notify that they've literally cut that off and ended it, versus picking that branch? And that's the same thing with like OpenSSL. There was a very big to do, like, I don't have time, this is what we're going to do, this is the last release, OpenSSL is doing their thing. And that's the point of like, well, then how many times you're going to run around a car trying to figure out like what fork you're going to start to kind of track and trust. And that's also one of those things too, is like the trustability of it, as Adam mentioned, like, well, he stopped developing and people were still using the thing years after active development. All right, well, how much of that code needs to be changed for new environments and other things that have come up since then? It then goes back into that whole as is. The suitability of that software starts to kind of degrade over time. Not saying you didn't develop good code, but multiply that out to all those open source projects that have become abandonware essentially, and then you've got a bigger problem.
Right. And now what about, and multiply it fork after fork, and which fork is, that it seems like
the one true fork, like the one true ring.
Yeah, which one? And again, that becomes contextual for the user of that package. That's interesting.
Yep. So there was some discussion about, when it gets popular enough, what do they do? When Apache got big enough, they created the Apache Foundation, and that's, a governance body that's helping to oversee this and maintain it. And OpenSSL had an OpenSSL Foundation, and OpenBSD also did a similar foundation, I believe, for that as well. So there are people who believe, when you own the code and it's yours, but if it gets big enough and it's a log4j popular enough, should there be an official, should it be turned over to a governance body like, the Apache Foundation, or, God forbid, somebody who's involved with Java still, or, should there be a turnover for popular applications, or an official quote unquote release that isn't necessarily maintained by any one person? Because some of these are a single point of failure, right? If the developer get hit by a bus, then that's the only person who had it. There are ways to fork it, but the main.
Can you have expectations if you don't pay anything for it?
And also, like,
a lot of people seem to think so. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and also developers are an obstinate group of people. Like, they don't like being told what to do.
Another thing,
So, like, coming in and like, you've reached this criteria, like you captured this many Pokemon, like to be told like, well, you've captured 100 of them. When you capture 101, we're going to come in and tell you how to manage your project. That won't necessarily fly. That gets back into, hopefully, inspiring projects to indicate what they need in the way of resources, going back to that. But also, one of the things I suggested in the article I wrote was leveraging what certain bodies are good for. And one of the things, like, the government's really good at, and I know with Alan Friedman pitching SBOM and CISA supporting that as well, in NTIA, is understanding of all these components, whether or not they are a standalone package like Apache, or make up imports and libraries for larger activities, is software of national security or import, that like there is 4 billion versions of 4 billion uses of this piece of software here, and it's helping run power plants or transportation systems and stuff. This is something that maybe CISA should get involved with, or whomever, internationally. Like, this is where they need to kind of come across with some international norms of how to resource it, not necessarily tell them what to do, but look at granting some resources to those organizations, whether or not be through a formal grant making process, or, if this is critical for a company or for a country or organization to run, that if it broke, bad things would happen, this is probably a time where, you need to kind of consider, kind of stepping more into the public sector realm and having that help kind of nestle that along, and maybe necessarily not tell developers this is what you must do, but here are some resources to do the things that you want to do.
Right. So Adam, you worked with NPM. Were there, you said I think when we interviewed you, you said you had a list of top applications that had tons of downloads, that you would review those because the other 95% of them didn't have the same type of popularity. Is there, and I'm not saying that NPM should do this, but should there be more involvement in those ecosystems or those organizations that have these repos, Angular, all of these, and at some point when they go, hey, you're getting a couple thousand downloads a day, maybe there's to be some outreach. It's like, hey, in order to maintain your effectiveness and to stay secure, and to make sure that you're not going to blow up the world, here's some things that you should probably look at, or maybe a terms of service that, like, if your app gets so hot, so popular, or so many downloads, we're going to help set you up with something. We're going to set you up with a grant program, $500 or something like that. Is that something that can be set up? Because, a lot of people are like, hey, Amazon should just be paying these people because they're using a ton of their stuff. And I'm like, how do you cut a check, of 6 figures to every piddly application developer out there? You're going to bankrupt the companies. Now, obviously they have a ton of money, but it's like, there's no good way to pay every dependency that you have in your environment, and if you do, it's going to be like, oh, wow, Amazon sent me a check for $20. Great. Or something like that, So what can be done in terms of outreach for that? Maybe a nice, sanity check with those folks. Hey, you got 10,000 downloads a day. Maybe you should be thinking more, about the future of your project.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, you've got all these projects that have popularity. We really, as NPM, as a ecosystem, hasn't done much to take developers through that. Hey, I'm a new developer. This thing is increasing in popularity. You've hit a milestone. Right. I think you're going to see some of that. I've seen public discussion about maybe you have this many thousands of downloads a week. We're going to force 2FA. Or things like that, that we start to. I both like that and I don't like that, because I like the freedom to make those choices myself, but I don't like that when I'm using some dependency and they don't have very good hygiene and no 2FA or whatever.
Well, you can do like a governance toolkit too. I mean, like, the idea is like,
exactly,
you can push suggestions to people. Obviously,
yep. Here's
plugging people over the head. But like you've reached 1,000 downloads a day. Maybe here's some things you need to think about, like, because not every developer has gone through a software engineering degree or whatever.
Right.
It's just more or less like, oh my gosh, your thing's blowing up. Here's something, it's things.
Congratulations.
What you should expecting when you're expecting a baby type kind of thing. Like, it's like once it's birthed, there's you're going to need to get inoculated. You got to worry about food, housing, all this other stuff, and that goes back. I talk about the topic of my the subject of my article. There was the free beer swilling puppy. So we think of it as like free stuff, and obviously free as in speech, but free as in baby, or free as in puppy. Like, there is a care and feeding that is required after that, and very few people think about that. And you'll
never be fully prepared.
And never be fully prepared.
Yeah. That is a great idea for a book. What to expect when you're going to be
you're expecting open source.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing, is it's like, we're really good at asking folks to include a YAML file or an XML file or a JSON file in their project root to support security reporting and a readme.md and all this other stuff. And maybe this other thing is, some level of transparency of how the project is got a roadmap or being governed, or, there is a wish list of things that we need. Like, hey, I've reached this point in my project that I am aware of that I need. And, here's a list of things. If you feel like you want to contribute to do these testing or server, pay my GitHub bill every year, what it takes to host it. Right. That goes a long way, because that's less overhead that they have to be concerned about. And then, if you get off the top that, like, you mentioned about the tip jar, or, hey, if you want to see me spend full time doing this, this is what it would take for me to kind of like walk away from my job to go and do that. There's always the fuck you money kind of point where people are like, oh, I'm good. You give me, like this guy said, you give me a 6-figure job, I'll go and do this full time. As much as this person may be an awful person, he clearly stated, this is what I would do to do this full time. And if more people were honest with themselves about that, who are doing this level of development, maybe, we'd get that kind of level of forward movement on some of this open source support stuff.
So do we need to, so open source that was 20, 25 years ago is far different than open source now. Have we actually gone backwards in terms of that? It's like everybody's, looking to be the next Linux, or, it's almost like, people, when Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings, everybody's just trying to create the next J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings trilogy. Everybody's trying to create the next
Game of Thrones.
Yeah. So. He got close.
So you're going to suggest that Web3 is going to solve our problem for
all right. No, Adam
do we
got
just go
kicked
off the
off
rails?
Internet. Oh
no.
Adam lost connectivity. My bad. Sorry. He got kicked off. Web3. Look, it's just 20. It's not even 10 days in. Man. Anyway. Yeah, we're gonna have to run that hurdle at some point. But yeah. So why did we do it? Why did we do open source 25 years ago? And what was our motivations then versus our motivations now? Because it seems like back when, Linux was the new hotness, everybody was like, oh, we're all sharing everything and the kumbaya and, sticking it to the man, and Bill Gates is the evil. And, actually I have a link in our show notes to the open letter to hobbyists about how he talks about stealing his software back in 1976, is bad, but you can read that if you want to. It was part of some of the research. But what was motivating people to do open source back then, and why did it change so much?
More hippies. No, but honestly, I think it's actually generational. I think about the folks who are, coming of age then. Your 40-year-olds that may have been kind of the senior folks in those projects then are now in retirement age, but those are the folks that, kind of come from a certain generation. Now it's a different type of people who are contributing to it, and they've lost maybe a little bit touch with history, kind of learning stuff, but also generally, the nature of what needs and demands are have greatly changed too. As we've bemoaned, certain modern generations willing to kind of give their entire life story and data for a free couple of tokens for a video game or access to a website. The calculus has definitely changed for that. And I think that also kind of carries over into people's willingness to, contribute back to certain projects, but also, kind of the value propositions they have for, using that kind of software. Like, Moxie Marlinspike, resigned as a CEO today, and that was a big thing. Like you read his first 2 paragraphs there, and that's typical developer burnout. Like I did all this thing, it reached a certain level, I'm out. And but Signal is a very widely used and trusted thing, but then on the other side you see about them potentially putting a crypto miner and whatnot, or adding, they mention the reason that they go away is because potentially regulatory scrutiny for doing trackless financial transactions. But then there was a mention of doing a crypto miner in there, and people are like, everybody's doing crypto miners now. Like, I don't want to be anywhere near that. And I think there's a point where some people, ethics or work, or the wrong kind of spotlight on them will have them back away from things.
Right. Yeah. If we hadn't had John this week, Miss Berlin, Mr. Betcher, and I were going to talk about things like Norton Antivirus putting, having an opt-in crypto miner and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, thank God it was opt-in. But so there's a ton of stuff there for that. Okay. So Emily, you mentioned in your blog post the Blender Development Fund. It says accepts donations, support activities, provide free and open accessible services for all Blender contributors. Is that unique in terms of Blender seems like a one-off. Are there other funds that are very similar that would do something like that?
I haven't had the time to kind of do a survey of that, but when I came across it as kind of the here it's literally like NPR for software. Like if you want to be in the gold circle, if you're for supporting your local station, contribute this and we'll give you a tote bag. Here, the tote bag is, putting your logo on a supporters page or putting the text or a link to whatever it is. It's not the world's greatest motivator because in the digital world, like, you can slap a banner on anything, but the idea is that, I've gotten in discussions at certain employers about, if we use this person's service or software, do we, as part of our licensing, do we allow them to say that we use it in their PR materials? This kind of flips the calculus on that of if companies want to use that level of PR to say that they are ardent open source supporters, this is a very easy method for them, regardless of size. It could be a Microsoft or it could be a 25-person small business to basically show that they actually support and use it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, some big names in this Blender Fund. Corporate Silvers, Google, OP Games, Activision, CoreWeave. Looks like apparently Google can't pony up to get up to gold like Adobe and Microsoft and them, but it's all right. You
got to spread the 20 among all of them. You need a little $1.50 here, $5 there. It's tight nowadays with Alphabet. So
yeah, I think it would be interesting to see something similar for that, or maybe the NPMs out there, or somebody will come up with something similar where it's like, hey, you're X popular, you're going to be getting a stipend of money every month and to help offset that cost, that the no strings attached kind of thing. Because I think the other thing that people worry about corporate involvement is it's going to start pushing that corporate agenda. Amazon gave me $15,000, now I'm expected to put this litany of features or something in, and it would take away from the idea of being open source or open development. But
you're just going to see abuse of those metrics too, as soon as funding comes based on whatever, right? If there's any type of automation there.
Well, I won't say for how I know this, but I know some organizations have participated in the governance or support of some foundations because the idea was it was to further their own efforts, whether or not be a direction or architecture choice. But as soon as that they've kind of funded enough to get down that one road, they've pulled support, they've backed out of it, and it's like, we're good, and suddenly there's either a gaping hole or it gets into a complex situation of what were the absolute motivations for participating overall, and how does that affect anybody else who may be part of the board or customers or so forth. So it becomes very sticky at that point, and that's one of those cases of how independent or non-commercially motivated are some of those boards when you do see corporate leadership on those as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. Ms. Berlin, anything else you'd like to bring up?
No, sir.
It's funny. We were talking about tip jars and stuff, and I was like, well, I do, Miss Berlin, I do put out. Oh no, don't worry about the dog. It's all good. My cat would be yowling if it wasn't taking a nap over here. So I think we have it on our bingo card anyway. So we put out an open source project on average about every week. We release a podcast, which is a deliverable. Right. It's
easy for us. I was gonna say it's easy for us to ask for money though.
Right.
My thought is with developers though, like instead of having it do a loop and like break everybody's software, just like have it pop up like a Bitcoin wallet.
So NPM has NPM Fund, right? And there's a way to add the ability to say, hey, I want funds, and that'll pop up during the install process. The problem is that's so much noise. It's just gonna, all the other stuff. It's sometimes just a lot to and somebody has to look at that, right? And then make a choice and go through purchasing.
Right.
It's a lot of barrier to entry to give somebody $5.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the challenge of, do you want to go the Patreon route, the Etsy route, or the Substack route? Just kind of like at what level and what umbrella are you trying to support, the creator at that point? Direct hands-on is your Etsy. You're buying a product, you get a product in return. They don't have restrictions on how you're going to hang it in your house or give it to your kids or whatever. Your Patreon is, obviously you can type licenses around that of like, this is for you to, if it's audio thing, you can consume it at that point and that's it. That's all you paid for. And then Substack, I have no idea how the hell that shit works, but it's just, those are those creator friendly funding mechanisms. But again, each one of those has an overhead to it. And that's the challenge of where does the overhead run in conflict with just basically kind of making this a smooth activity for those creators.
That's cool.
And code is art. Creators, code is art. It's language, it's speech. Treat it like that too. Don't make it that it's just so technically orientated and it's bits and bytes. It is creativity, it is art, it is language, it is, think of it that way. You're funding the arts essentially.
She's my favorite guest. She said our podcast is art. So I'm just kidding. Anyway, So I appreciate everybody's thoughts here on this. And I was reading through some of this and some of the stuff on Twitter. It either seemed like some people got it or some people didn't, and then there's a lot to dig through here. You can't just say, hey, Amazon, throw these people some money because, there's legal issues behind this, legal's going to want you to file a 1099 if you pay them enough money because, then they'd be a contractor. You've got legal issues if big companies are trying to push that through. And, if there's no good infrastructure, I mean, you've got, Blender Fund, you've got, Substack and those, but, how many developers are actually using those? Well, there's that too. So anything else that we want to touch on before we go? I do appreciate everybody's time. Our time is money. That's really, what we're, it's free, but we take a hit every time. So, but anything else, Adam, Emily, you'd like to bring up before we go? Any last thoughts? Okay.
I just hope it gets fixed at some point. It's not going to be an overnight thing. That is, I think everybody really needs to understand that this is going to be something you're going to have to not dig your heels into, but understand you got to put your back into it and make it happen. I don't know who's going to make the first move on this, but I hope it's soon. I don't want another one of these ruined holidays for all my friends out there in the tech world who have removed time from their families and so forth, especially in this trying time like the pandemic.
Yeah. And a lot of these companies didn't even realize they had Log4j in their environments. That's the thing. It's not like, it's not like Amazon or Microsoft or something where they have everything in their environment. You may have bought a product that has it inside of it, like, and you don't even know. And unless you have that information from those third parties, you've been affected and you just don't know it yet. So, I would expect that there's going to be more like this. I think I don't know how organizations are going to find these linchpin kind of systems, like the libpngs of the world or GStreamer.
It forms a big graph. You can look and find them, right? Like that's the thing is researcher. You can run the numbers and find these things. Attackers are doing it, right? They're looking for those particular. Those are the targets, right? Those particular popular packages or those intersections. Those small packages.
How do I search GitHub for things that are downloaded a million times a week, but only have 2 developers working on it?
Ouch! Yeah.
Just count the commits.
Like
essentially,
just count the
libraries.io. Libraries.io used to be a few years ago was pulling in all that type of data and kind of giving kind of a risk metric around that. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the other issues too. Like, I think Bo Woods and his colleague got covered for creating a search engine because especially, with CISA trying to coordinate the effort for the Log4j response, it was, they were posting all the vendor responses and stuff in GitHub as a huge text file and whatnot. And it was just very hard, once you got above a certain level to search and find that. And that's just one vulnerability. Right. I know we have CVE and the National Vulnerability Database and all this other stuff. And it just gets to be troublesome, or not troublesome. It becomes complex and onerous for folks to basically say, all right, I know I'm a customer of Oracle. I know I'm a customer of Microsoft, and I think I have these products installed. Short of scanning all this stuff, is there a quick way I can kind of look up and can I breathe a sigh of relief for not finding it in this database? Or should I be worried because that vendor hasn't participated in this disclosure process? And that's the other big issue. I know definitely, when I worked at CERT, and one of the challenges that was CERT C, and one of the challenges that was there was literally kind of managing and poking vendors to kind of acknowledge that they have a problem, and then sharing those patches and whatnot out. And now that CISA has taken that over in the U.S. side of the U.S. government side of the house, the authorities, which we talked about earlier, becomes more and more difficult because it's less of a neutral third party the way an FFRDC was, and now it's the government. And a lot of places, especially when you want to interact with the government, don't necessarily want to disclose that they have a problem because that can affect contracts and bring down regulatory things upon them. So sometimes it's more or less, you found the vulnerability in our software. Okay, well, we'll go and fix it, and they'll deal with it afterwards. It's kind of that insecurity by obscurity kind of method there. So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, libraries.io. NPM has 2.19 million packages so far. That's what they say. But yeah, NuGet, Go, 500,000 there. Yeah, there's a lot there.
There's a bunch of bus factors, the thing I think you're looking for in libraries.io, but
yeah. The other thing that worries me about this is you've got a couple of, you got the log4j folks. Let's say you get approached by somebody who's like, hey, we want to buy that. Here's a couple $1 million. We'll take your problem and make it go away. That kind of thing. You won't have to deal with, annoying people who are complaining about your pull stuff all day. Just, let us have it.
What's wrong with that though? I mean, I sold NSP to NPM.
I would.
There you go.
Right.
Well,
It depends on intent, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, MySQL to Oracle. I mean, I remember when Monty did that for a while, and then kind of wrote a couple of years later, like, no, I'm good. I'm leaving, and this is what I hated about that relationship. You see that a lot with startups too. Like people have their companies bought. They're there for as long as it takes for them to their golden parachute to vest, and they're gone. And then they'll basically say, yeah, this was just a bad move, and I took it for the money sometimes. And how do you avoid that? Those kind of indecent proposals, as it would be. I'm not saying Adam had an indecent proposal, but there is a point where it does come to the motivations.
I just think at some point, and this was alluded to with the governance package that was mentioned. When you get popular, you have to change the way you're thinking about your product. It's no longer a hobby at that point. So if somebody does legitimately come to you and say, yeah, here's a couple $1 million, you can't just go, all right, I'm out. That kind of thing. I mean, I find it irresponsible, but I understand why somebody would want to do that. But there needs to be some kind of notification or something before somebody just says, yeah, I'm just going to toss this to that way people can plan for that. Otherwise you're going to end up with crypto miners in your browser, or, God knows what these people are.
Or in your AV software.
There you go.
It
$2 million.
I was at Symantec during kind of, Norton antivirus heyday, and it kills me to see that.
Yeah. I mean, I worry about that. It's like once you get popular enough, it's no longer your project. There's other people who are depending on you for that. And just seems like there needs to be some kind of, turnover, or, notify people, hey, I'm looking to get rid of this,
so there is, you can see, like, especially for NPM, you can see like package maintainers and things like that. And if something switches, that is there, but I could just give you my account and you wouldn't notice, and
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's the thing with properly gating like releases and things like that. And I think there's two choke points, I guess, is discovery, right? When you're picking a package to use and vetting that it does what you say it needs to do. And then the next time is certifying it so it's still good, right? During every release. That's hard to do when you multiply that. Do that at scale, but
yeah, and you have those issues too, like you mentioned about gating, where I guess was it last year the year before, 2020, when was it University of Minnesota was doing those commits back into the Linux kernel, this is research and whatever, and we're hoping that people find the thing that we included, and it's kind of like, I don't need this to be a snipe hunt at this point. Like that's just bad karma in general. And while that was for research, what's keeping people from, as you mentioned, like being that bad actor to kind of slip something in is, while the log4j thing was potentially an innocent feature request, the JD&I stuff, when you look at it long-term on the strategy and what it was going to affect later on, that was kind of a bad architectural decision, and who governs that, who makes those choices, who's kind of guiding that along.
And who's going to start learning that we're going to start playing the long game and what long game is we playing right now, right? They're embedding themselves and
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yep. And I'm sure that one developer would more than love to have help. So here's my friend who's coming in, and you don't know if he's going to do something malicious or whatever. But anyway. All right. Well, there's still a lot to tear down on this. And, I look forward to people's hate mail for the fart app comment and, those other things. Adam, you mentioned on Twitter, this is the first podcast you've done in over a year or appearance anywhere. Are you going to be planning on making any appearances in the near future anywhere?
I'm trying to disappear into the woods and not think about these things. I feel like a broken record after 10 years of talking about NPM security stuff. And so I've kind of just, you asked to talk about this and I was like, yeah, sure. We'll chat. Pretty informal about it, but yeah.
We'll have you back on for red team stuff. That way you'll have something other to talk about than, cool. But, you have to admit it puts you in a very unique position of actually knowing how the sausage is made. So to speak.
It's exhausting. I'm tired. I'm tired, and I want behaviors to change. I want some of those behaviors that companies are exhibiting to change for their benefit and the benefit of the ecosystems and communities.
Okay. Well, if people wanted to continue conversing about open source in general, how would they get a hold of you? Online?
Adam_Baldwin on Twitter is the best way to find me.
Okay. All right. Amélie, I know you started your new job at that company and sadly you're leaving the Pacific Northwest and going back to the East Coast, much to, the East Coast is definitely winning out and getting the better end of this deal. But
what is this weather you guys have here? This is not what was promised me.
Look, I didn't order 117-degree summer. Okay, I swear that was a weird.
Or the freak snowstorms, or the endless raining. Yeah.
Well, the freak snowstorms, we do get at least one good snow here up in Seattle, where you get the stories about the see the videos of the buses that are coming down the hill, sliding down with their chains and everything, and you kind of have to laugh at that kind of stuff. But I will miss not being able to spend more time with you, but I am so happy that you came and spoke at our conference. It was
fun.
Very appreciative.
Got to ride the motorcycle to it. That was fun. So yeah.
How would people find you if they wanted to talk about motorcycles or the DMV area of the United States? Or
well, most likely once I get back there, I tend to volunteer a lot for staff conferences. So if any of the local conferences there, I'll probably be helping staff those. But until then, you need to find me Web Jedi on Twitter. Unfortunately, due to the new employer, I'm not usually getting a chance to speak out. I'm speaking as under my own fruition and name and history here, not necessarily on behalf of them. So I will put that disclaimer at the end of this podcast. Just feel free to scream at the end of the ether at me at that address.
Cool. All right. Excellent. Ms. Berlin, I saw on LinkedIn you're going to be speaking on a web conference in the near future. What's that all about?
I don't know which one.
It's something having to do with one of our previous sponsors, which is Blumera. So it's a workshop or something.
That's a great question. I don't know.
Well, your picture was on
different
there,
stuff.
so.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know. I'm signed up for a whole bunch of stuff that I'm talking about.
Okay.
There's a guy, Brian Johnson, I think I'm getting his name right. He's another podcaster. It's called 7 Minute Security. He actually had a 5 or 6 part podcast where he was reviewing SIMs for small and medium businesses.
Okay.
And had no idea that we were even a thing. And somebody told him about us. And even though he was being sponsored by another SIM product, like ours, won out like crazy. So
oops,
I got to make some really cool detections just based off of his response. And we're going to do a talk with him. And then a couple other things. I don't know. I know I'm signed up for 4 things this month.
Okay. Well, maybe we can get Meta and have 7 Minute Security on the podcast here to talk about the results of the SIM stuff. So
that would be cool.
Yeah, we'll see if we can reach out to 7 Minute Sec here and see what's up. So you've got a lot going on with mental health mental health conferences and workshops and stuff. Maybe you could tell people a little bit about what's coming up for that?
Sure. So we're spinning up a lot now that people are starting to do things kind of in person again. I don't have anything official yet for anything but Wild West Hacking Fest Way West in San Diego.
Okay.
But we have 7 other conferences on our list for Q1 and 2 already.
Okay.
And I want to try and do something officially for DEF CON that isn't at the last minute.
Okay. Very cool. And you're be coming and doing a workshop for InfoSec Campout, right?
No.
Don't give me that look.
Dude, you scheduled at the same time as Blue Team Con again.
I'd like to
Same
think we were
time.
before Blue Team Con. So anyway,
Same time.
Way West Hacking Fest is May 4th through 6th at the Wyndham San Diego Bayside. Ooh, that's nice. That's a nice hotel. Yeah, we went down there a couple weeks ago in San Diego to see our rental house. So very cool. $350 in-person con, $150 ticket for virtual con.
Yeah, we're doing our tabletop training, our IR tabletop training.
Okay. Yeah, San Diego's lovely in May. It's just fantastic. So, okay. And how would people find you online on Twitter if they wanted to talk to you
so
about all things?
InfoSystir, INFOSYSTIR, or at Hackers Health.
Okay. And InfoSec Roleplay is your tabletop exercise organization?
Yep.
Okay.
One of them. Yeah.
Cool.
We don't do good with marketing ourselves.
I know. So
it's super. I mean, that's what happens when you're doing like 30 things.
Yep. So Mr. Betcher messaged me during the show saying, "Hey, I'm just getting out of work now," which was at about 7:30 my time. So Pacific. So I think he's been beat down with all the Log4j stuff, dealing with that. So once we get him back in the office here, we'll go over that. So he is the lead developer on a Windows forensics tool called LogMD, which will take your logs and your Windows systems and configure the logging on those to be more effective for your SIMs or to help Miss Berlin over at Blumera, find, detections of bad shite going on, or, stymie Adam Baldwin when he's doing his red team engagements. So if you're interested in checking that out, go to log-md.com, and you can find Mr. Betcher on Twitter at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. Official podcast is a Breaksec, BRAKESEC, and you can find me on Twitter at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. Before we talked on the show, we did a meeting with our officers. We're going to be getting our CFP for InfoSec Campout up sometime in May. I know that's a ways off, but it will be here before you know it. We're also looking for workshops. So if you have an idea for a workshop, we would love to potentially have you submit that. So we will be, doing more announcements as we go along, but we do have some people that actually know how to do CFPs and CFWs. Wendy Knox Everett helps out a lot with B-Sides Las Vegas. She's one of the organizers there, so she knows her way around a CFP, and Miss Berlin has definitely done a few herself. So we know how to not do them wrong. So that's a double negative. I don't English good, so we have people who are smart about doing these things.
We know the goods and we know the bads.
Yeah, that's right. So we will be putting more information about that as we go along. So if you're interested in coming to an outside conference, and it will be in person, but we're also looking at virtualizing some parts of it. So, but we'll see. That's still in flux as well. But you can follow us on Twitter at InfoSec Campout. Which fairly easy, and it's a fairly low traffic. So thank you to our Patreon donors. As we have our tip jar for our open source project, so to we have a Patreon where people can come and give us a little money to offset hosting costs, Zooms, fees, etc. And your money also goes and helps pay for the conference, any monies that we have left over. So I'd like to also thank George. He became a $3 patron. So George F., if you're listening, thank you for your money. That happened back on the 26th of December, but we haven't had any new shows since then. So thank you for your support, George. We appreciate it. I think, we have a Slack. I would call that the BreakSec ISAC, if you want to call that information sharing. We do a lot of educational items there. We also do a lot of discussion with threat hunting and threat intel. So, people finding all kinds of stuff online, they tend to post it up in there. Malicious IPs or, phishing attempts or something. So if you're looking for that, you can send us an email, bds.podcast@gmail.com, or hit our Twitter account. So, all right, that was it for this week. I do appreciate Adam and Amélie for coming on at pretty much short notice. I'm just so happy that y'all were able to come on and join us for our first show of 2022, first couple shows of 2022, as a matter of fact. We have a great episode coming up next week with Alyssa Miller and on IoT privacy and security that really kind of affects me from a professional sense. So I'm going to enjoy having discussion with them, and I hope Ms. Berlin will be able to join me on that, because I think it'll be pretty awesome. But hope everyone has a great week. Thank you all for getting on here with us. Cool. Right on. All right. Have a great week. Be kind to one another. Take care of yourselves out there in 2022. Stay masked up and get vaxxed, and take care of yourselves, because as we always say here, you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Thanks, dude.